Luke Skywalker is hanging from an antenna beneath Cloud City. His hand is gone. His father just cut it off. And Darth Vader is reaching out to him, offering him everything: power, truth, a place by his father's side. In the movie, Luke lets go. He falls into the abyss rather than join the dark side. But what if he doesn't? What if, in this moment of ultimate pain and betrayal, Luke reaches up and takes his father's hand? Everything changes. The rebellion dies. The Empire wins. And the galaxy's last hope becomes its worst nightmare. This is the story of how one choice destroys everything. How the farm boy from Tatooine becomes Emperor Skywalker. How the hero of the rebellion hunts down his own friends. And how Leia Organa watches her brother transform into the monster they swore to destroy. This isn't a story about what could have been. This is about how close we came to losing everything. Because Luke Skywalker almost fell. And if he had, the galaxy would have burned. Let's talk about that moment on Cloud City. Luke has just learned the most horrifying truth of his life. Darth Vader, the man who killed his father, the monster he's been taught to hate, is actually his father. Everything Obi-Wan told him was a lie. His entire identity, his entire mission, has been built on deception. He's been manipulated by everyone he trusted. Vader is the only one who told him the truth, and Vader is offering him a choice. Join me, and together we'll rule the galaxy as father and son. It's not just an offer of power, it's an offer of family. Luke grew up an orphan, raised by his aunt and uncle, never knowing his real parents. Now his father is right here, reaching out to him, wanting him. All Luke has to do is take his hand. In our timeline, the one that leads to darkness, Luke's pain overwhelms him. The betrayal by Obi-Wan cuts too deep. The feeling of being used, of being lied to, of being sent unprepared into a trap by the rebellion, it's too much. The dark side whispers that Vader is right, that the Jedi are hypocrites, that power is the only truth that matters. And in his moment of weakness, broken and bleeding, Luke reaches up. For our timeline, let's focus on what might be the most psychologically devastating moment: Cloud City. Picture this. Luke has just been brutally defeated by Darth Vader. He's lost his hand. He's hanging from an antenna beneath the city, and he's just learned the most horrifying truth of his life. The man who killed his father, the monster he's been taught to hate, the Dark Lord he's sworn to destroy, is actually his father. Everything Ben Kenobi told him was a lie. His entire identity, his entire mission, has been built on a deception. In the original timeline, Luke chooses to let go, to fall into the abyss rather than join Vader. It's a leap of faith that demonstrates his strength of character. But what if in this moment of ultimate despair and betrayal something breaks inside him? What if the pain, the anger, the feeling of being manipulated and lied to becomes too much? Vader is offering him power, truth, and a place by his father's side. The rebellion has sent him unprepared into a trap. Obi-Wan lied to him. Yoda withheld the truth. In this vulnerable moment, what if Luke reaches up and takes Vader's hand? The moment Luke accepts Vader's offer, the galaxy changes forever. Vader pulls his son up from the precipice, and for the first time in decades, Anakin Skywalker feels something other than pain and hatred. He has his son. He has family. But this is still Darth Vader, and he has plans. Together, they return to Vader's ship, and Luke begins to understand the full scope of what he's agreed to. Vader doesn't waste time. He begins Luke's training immediately, but this isn't the patient, philosophical teaching of Yoda. This is brutal, practical, and rooted in pain and anger. Vader teaches Luke to draw on his emotions, to use his pain as fuel. The loss of his hand, the betrayal by his mentors, the death of his aunt and uncle, the destruction of Alderaan, even though Leia was there, all of it becomes a wellspring of dark side power. And Luke is uniquely powerful. He's the son of the Chosen One, with a potential that might even exceed his father's. Under Vader's tutelage, Luke's abilities grow at an alarming rate. But there's a complication. Emperor Palpatine. When Vader brings Luke before the Emperor, Palpatine is initially pleased. This is what he always wanted after all, the Skywalker bloodline serving the dark side. But Palpatine is no fool. He sees the bond between father and son, and he recognizes the threat. The rule of two states that there should only be a master and an apprentice. Now there are 3 Sith, or at least 3 dark side users of tremendous power. Palpatine begins to play them against each other, just as he once pitted other apprentices against each other, testing their loyalty and their strength. Vader, however, has his own plans. He didn't save his son just to hand him over to Palpatine. He remembers the Emperor's manipulations, how Palpatine used Padme's death to complete his fall. Now, with Luke by his side, Vader begins to think about the possibility he offered at Cloud City, overthrowing the Emperor and ruling the galaxy together as father and son. But to do that, they need to become stronger, and they need to eliminate Palpatine's other assets. Luke's first mission as a dark side apprentice is both a test and a tragedy. Vader sends him to hunt down the remaining Jedi survivors, the few who escaped Order 66 and have been hiding throughout the galaxy. This serves multiple purposes. It eliminates potential threats, it bloodies Luke in the ways of the Sith, and it severs his final ties to his old life. With each Jedi Luke hunts down and kills, he falls deeper into the dark side. The guilt and horror of these acts are transformed into fuel for his power, creating a vicious cycle of darkness. But what about the rebellion? What about Luke's friends? When word reaches the Rebel Alliance that Luke Skywalker has turned, the impact is devastating. Leia, who has just begun to acknowledge her feelings for Luke beyond friendship, is heartbroken and furious. She feels betrayed, not just by Luke, but by the Force itself. How could the person who was supposed to be their hope become their enemy? Han Solo refuses to believe it at first. He's convinced Luke is undercover, playing a long game or being controlled somehow. But as reports come in of Luke leading Imperial forces, of Luke wielding a red lightsaber, of Luke executing rebels and Jedi alike, even Han has to face the truth. The rebellion's morale crumbles. Luke wasn't just another soldier. He was a symbol. He was proof that the Empire could be resisted, that the Jedi could return, that good could triumph over evil. His fall suggests that maybe the dark side is inevitable, that maybe the Empire is too strong to defeat. Desertions increase. Recruitment plummets. Entire cells go dark, assuming the cause is lost. Mon Mothma and Admiral Akbar struggle to hold the Alliance together, but without Luke, and with the Empire growing bolder, their position becomes increasingly desperate. Leia, however, refuses to give up. She channels her grief and anger into action, becoming more determined than ever to destroy the Empire, and if necessary, to stop Luke herself. This is when her own Force sensitivity begins to manifest more strongly. In the original timeline, Leia's training would come much later, but here, driven by necessity and emotion, she begins to develop her abilities earlier. She seeks out whatever Jedi lore the rebellion has managed to preserve, trying to teach herself what Luke learned from Yoda. Meanwhile, Luke and Vader's campaign against the rebellion intensifies. Luke's intimate knowledge of rebel tactics, bases, and personnel makes him devastatingly effective. He knows how the rebels think because he was one of them. He knows their fallback positions, their codes, and their psychology. Under his and Vader's leadership, the Empire begins to systematically dismantle the rebellion. Bases that had been safe for years are suddenly discovered and destroyed. Rebel leaders are captured or killed. Supply lines are cut. The noose tightens, but Luke is changing in other ways too. The dark side is corrupting him, not just morally but physically. His eyes begin to show the yellow tint of the Sith. His face becomes harder, colder. The compassion and warmth that defined him are replaced by ruthless efficiency and controlled anger. He becomes a figure of terror throughout the galaxy. The Dark Apprentice, the Emperor's new enforcer. Even more feared than Vader in some ways because of how quickly and how far he's fallen. Yet beneath the surface, the light hasn't entirely died. There are moments when Luke hesitates, when he sees a rebel fighter who reminds him of Biggs, or when he senses Leia's presence through the Force. These moments become increasingly rare, but they're there, tiny cracks in his dark side armor. Vader notices these hesitations and uses them in his own manipulations, reminding Luke of the pain the rebellion caused him, of Obi-Wan's lies, turning Luke's momentary compassion back into anger. As Luke grows more powerful, Palpatine's concern deepens. The Emperor begins to see that Vader's plan is working too well. Luke is not becoming Palpatine's weapon. He's becoming Vader's partner. The bond between father and son is strengthening, and together they represent a genuine threat to Palpatine's rule. The Emperor decides he needs to drive a wedge between them, to force Luke to choose between his father and his master. Palpatine's opportunity comes when the rebellion, now desperate and on the verge of collapse, attempts a daring operation. They've learned that the Empire is constructing a second Death Star, and they plan to destroy it before it becomes operational. But it's a trap, of course. Palpatine has deliberately leaked the information. She speaks to him of their friends, of their shared experiences, of the Luke who destroyed the Death Star and saved her from the detention block. She tells him that she can feel the conflict in him, that she knows the light is still there. It's a deliberate echo of what Luke would tell Vader in the original timeline, and for a moment, it seems to work. Luke's lightsaber wavers. His eyes meet hers, and for just an instant, they're not yellow. But then Luke feels Palpatine's presence, watching through the Force, testing him. He feels Vader's expectations, and he remembers all the pain, all the betrayals, all the reasons he chose this path. His lightsaber comes up not to kill Leia, but to disarm her, to capture her as Palpatine commanded. The fight is brief and brutal. Leia is skilled and determined, but Luke is simply too powerful. He defeats her, binds her in the Force, and brings her before the Emperor. On the Death Star in the throne room, Palpatine confronts Luke with a terrible choice. He can kill Leia and prove his loyalty to the dark side, becoming Palpatine's true heir, or he can refuse and reveal himself as a traitor, in which case Palpatine will kill them both. Vader stands to the side, silent, his feelings hidden behind his mask. Palpatine is using this moment to accomplish multiple goals, eliminating another Force-sensitive threat, testing Luke's commitment, and potentially forcing Vader to choose between his son and his daughter, further weakening the bond between Vader and Luke. Luke stands over his captive sister, his red lightsaber ignited, and the galaxy holds its breath. Below them, the battle rages. The Rebel fleet is being torn apart by Imperial forces. The shield generator on Endor, which the Rebel strike team was supposed to destroy, remains operational because Luke captured Leia before the mission could be completed. The rebellion is dying, and Luke has the power to deliver the final blow. This moment represents the absolute nadir of Luke's fall. He's standing in almost the exact same position as his father stood decades ago, faced with a choice between loyalty to an evil master and love for family. Where Anakin chose Palpatine and lost everything, Luke has the chance to break the cycle. But the difference is that Luke has been marinating in the dark side for months now, perhaps even a year or more. He's killed Jedi, he's slaughtered rebels. He's done things that would have been unthinkable to the farm boy from Tatooine. As Luke looks down at Leia, bound and helpless before him, he sees her defiance. She's not begging for her life. She's not pleading with him. She's looking at him with a mixture of pity and disappointment that cuts deeper than any lightsaber ever could. In her eyes, he sees a reflection of who he used to be, and for the first time since Cloud City, Luke truly questions what he's become. The throne room is silent except for the hum of his lightsaber and the distant sounds of battle. Palpatine watches with hungry anticipation, savoring this moment of ultimate corruption. Vader's mechanical breathing is the only other sound, steady and rhythmic, a metronome counting down to an irreversible decision. In this critical instant, Luke's mind races through everything that brought him here. He remembers his aunt and uncle's burning bodies, and how Obi-Wan told him stormtroopers did it, setting him on this path. He remembers the Death Star destroying Alderaan, Leia's home, billions of lives snuffed out in an instant. He remembers his training with Yoda, cut short by his need to save his friends, a decision Yoda warned him against. He remembers Cloud City, the duel, the revelation, the choice to fall rather than join Vader, and how his friend saved him anyway, pulling him out of the abyss and giving him another chance. But he also remembers what happened after. The lies became clearer. Obi-Wan admitted to his deceptions, justifying them with philosophical nonsense about points of view. Yoda confirmed that Vader was his father and that Luke would have to face him. Everyone had been preparing Luke to be a weapon, to kill his own father without telling him the truth. The betrayal ran deep, and Vader, despite everything, had offered him honesty. Vader told him the truth when everyone else had lied. Luke's thoughts turned to his training under Vader. It was harsh, yes, but effective. He learned more in weeks than he did in months on Dagobah. Vader taught him that the Force wasn't about serene meditation and lifting rocks. It was about power, about bending reality to your will, about taking control rather than letting the universe control you. And with that power, Luke convinced himself he could make things better. He could end the rebellion's futile struggle, bring order to the galaxy, and prevent more suffering like what he saw on Tatooine, on Alderaan, and on countless other worlds. But now, looking at Leia, he's forced to confront the reality of what that means. Making things better requires him to kill his sister. Bringing order requires him to extinguish one of the last free spirits in the galaxy. Preventing suffering requires him to cause the ultimate suffering to the person who has become one of the most important figures in the rebellion. Someone whose death would break the spirit of millions who still believe freedom is possible. Palpatine's voice cuts through his thoughts like a knife. The Emperor begins speaking, his words dripping with dark satisfaction. He tells Luke that this is his destiny, that the Skywalker line has always been meant to serve the dark side, that his grandmother was born of the Force itself, and that his grandfather fell because it was inevitable, that his father slaughtered children and burned the Jedi Temple, and now Luke will complete the circle by killing the last princess of Alderaan, the symbol of rebellion, his own sister. The Emperor's words are carefully chosen, designed to push Luke over the edge. He speaks of how Leia has led rebels who killed Imperial soldiers, many of them just ordinary people doing their jobs, trying to feed their families. He mentions the Death Star, destroyed by Luke himself, killing over 1 million Imperial personnel, most of whom had nothing to do with Alderaan's destruction. He paints the rebellion as terrorists and murderers, and Leia as one of their chief architects of destruction. Palpatine argues that killing Leia would actually save lives, would end the bloodshed, would bring peace. And horrifyingly, part of Luke believes it. Part of him has been convinced that the rebellion is prolonging suffering, that if they would just surrender, if they would just accept Imperial rule, the fighting would stop. He's seen the casualties on both sides. He's watched Imperial soldiers die, many of them young men not so different from himself. The dark side whispers to him that one death, even Leia's death, is better than thousands, better than millions. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. It's logical. It's rational. It's pragmatic, but then Leia speaks. Her voice is quiet but firm. She doesn't address Palpatine or even acknowledge his presence. She speaks only to Luke, and she says something that cuts through all the rationalizations, all the dark side logic, all the careful manipulation. She tells him that she forgives him. She says that she knows he's been hurt, that he's been lied to, that he's angry and scared and feeling betrayed by everyone he trusted. She tells him that she understands why he took Vader's hand, why he chose this path, and that even now, even here, even with a lightsaber at her throat, she doesn't hate him. She loves him. She always will. And she knows that somewhere inside, the real Luke Skywalker is still there. These words, so simple yet so powerful, create a crack in Luke's dark side armor. Love. Not romantic love. Not possessive love, but the pure, unconditional love of family. The same kind of love that will eventually save Vader in the original timeline. It's a love that doesn't demand anything in return. Doesn't require Luke to be anyone other than who he is. Doesn't judge him for his failures. It's the love that Padme had for Anakin. The love that Anakin threw away when he chose power over everything else. Luke's lightsaber trembles. His yellow eyes flicker, showing hints of blue beneath. Palpatine senses the shift and his satisfaction turns to concern. The Emperor moves quickly, unleashing Force lightning not at Luke, but at Leia. The blue-white energy courses through her body and she screams in agony. Palpatine tells Luke that if he won't kill her, then she'll die anyway, slowly and painfully, unless Luke proves his loyalty by striking her down quickly. Mercifully, this is the moment of ultimate choice. The moment that will define not just Luke's fate, but the fate of the entire galaxy for generations to come. And here, our dark timeline branches into several possibilities, each one more tragic than the last. In one version of events, Luke's moment of hesitation proves fatal. While he wavers, Palpatine continues to torture Leia with Force lightning. Vader, watching his daughter die and his son struggle, makes a decision. He turns on Palpatine, just as he does in the original timeline, grabbing the Emperor and attempting to throw him down the reactor shaft. But in this timeline, Luke doesn't throw away his lightsaber. Luke doesn't declare himself a Jedi. Luke is still armed, still dangerous and still conflicted. When Vader attacks Palpatine, Luke's instinct, honed by months of dark side training, is to defend his master. He moves to stop Vader, and father and son clash once again, but this time they're on opposite sides. Vader is trying to save his children, trying to redeem himself at the last possible moment, while Luke is still trapped in the dark side's grip, still believing that Palpatine's rule is necessary for order. Their duel is brief but intense. Vader is older, damaged, and weakened. Luke defeats his father. He strikes Vader down, cutting through the chest panel that houses his life support systems. Vader collapses, dying. And with his last breath, he begs Luke to remove his mask so he can see his son with his own eyes one last time. Luke, suddenly realizing what he's done, removes the mask and sees Anakin Skywalker's face, scarred and pale. Anakin tells Luke that he's sorry, that he tried to save him and Leia, that he failed them both just as he failed Padme. He tells Luke that it's not too late, that he can still turn back, that the light is still there inside him. And then Anakin Skywalker dies, having failed to achieve redemption, having died at his own son's hand. Meanwhile, during the duel, Palpatine has continued his assault on Leia. By the time Luke turns back to the Emperor, Leia is on the brink of death, her body racked with pain from the sustained Force lightning. Palpatine stops his attack and congratulates Luke. He tells him that by choosing to stop Vader instead of joining him, Luke has proven his loyalty beyond any doubt. He has killed his father to protect his master. There is no greater demonstration of commitment to the dark side. But Luke, looking at his father's body and his sister's tortured form, doesn't feel victorious. He feels hollow, empty. The moment of clarity that Vader's death brings is devastating. He really sees what he's done. He's murdered his father. He's allowed his sister to be tortured nearly to death. He's betrayed everything his aunt and uncle taught him, everything Obi-Wan tried to instill in him, everything Yoda hoped he would become. He's become exactly what he set out to destroy. Palpatine, sensing Luke's turmoil, moves quickly to reinforce his control. He uses the Force to keep Leia barely alive, promising Luke that he'll heal her if Luke swears absolute loyalty to him. He offers Luke everything: power, knowledge, the position of heir to the Empire, and his sister's life. All Luke has to do is kneel and pledge himself completely to the dark side, renouncing any attachment to his former life. And Luke, broken and desperate, does it. He kneels before Palpatine and swears loyalty, not because he believes in the Empire anymore, not because he wants power, but because he can't bear to let Leia die too. He's already killed his father. He can't lose his sister as well. It's a decision made from emotion, from attachment, the very thing the Jedi warned against. But it's also the final nail in Luke's coffin. By swearing loyalty to save Leia, he's bound himself to Palpatine in a way that can't easily be undone. Palpatine heals Leia, but only partially. He keeps her weak, dependent on continued treatment that only Palpatine can provide. She becomes a hostage without being imprisoned, a guarantee of Luke's good behavior. If Luke ever turns against the Emperor, Leia will die from the lingering effects of the Force lightning. It's a perfect trap, and both Skywalker siblings know it. Leia is kept on Coruscant, nominally a guest, but actually a prisoner. Luke remains at Palpatine's side, now his unquestioned apprentice, his father dead by his own hand. The rebellion, learning of Leia's capture and Vader's death, is thrown into chaos. Their princess is a hostage. Luke Skywalker killed his own father and remains loyal to the Emperor. The shield generator on Endor was never destroyed, and the Death Star remains operational. The rebel fleet is forced to retreat, having accomplished nothing. Many of their capital ships were destroyed in the battle, and their losses are catastrophic. In the months and years that follow, the rebellion fractures. Without Leia's leadership, and with Luke firmly on the Empire's side, many rebels lose hope. Some surrender. Others go underground, becoming little more than terrorists, carrying out sporadic attacks that accomplish nothing except to provoke Imperial reprisals. Han Solo becomes obsessed with rescuing Leia, but every attempt fails. Chewbacca stands by him, loyal to the end, but even the mighty Wookiee can't breach Coruscant's defenses. Luke continues his service to Palpatine, growing more powerful, but also more miserable. He visits Leia regularly, and their conversations are heartbreaking. She never stops trying to reach him, to remind him of who he was, but she also understands why he did what he did. He saved her life by swearing loyalty to Palpatine. In a twisted way, it was an act of love, even if it doomed him to darkness. Their relationship becomes one of mutual tragedy. Two siblings trapped in a nightmare of their own making, unable to escape or to save each other. Palpatine, having successfully secured Luke's loyalty, begins to reshape the Empire with his new apprentice at his side. Luke is paraded before the galaxy as proof that even the rebellion's greatest hero recognized the futility of resisting Imperial rule. Propaganda holovids show Luke speaking about the necessity of order, about how the rebellion only prolongs suffering, about how he was once blind but now sees the truth. Some of these statements are made under duress, with Leia's life hanging in the balance, but others, horrifyingly, are sincere. The dark side has convinced Luke that this is the only way, that serving Palpatine is the lesser evil. But Palpatine makes a critical mistake. He underestimates the bond between the Skywalker twins. Leia, despite her weakened state, hasn't given up. She's been slowly healing herself using the Force, drawing on techniques she's painstakingly learned from stolen holocrons and ancient texts. She's also been working on Luke, not openly trying to turn him, but subtly reminding him of who he was, planting seeds of doubt that she hopes will eventually grow. Years pass. Luke becomes Palpatine's enforcer, leading campaigns to crush the last remnants of organized resistance. He's efficient, ruthless, and terrifyingly powerful, but he's also increasingly troubled. The initial certainty that drew him to the dark side, the belief that he was bringing order and preventing suffering, is eroding. He sees the cruelty of Imperial rule up close. He sees innocent people crushed under the Empire's boot. He sees worlds stripped of their resources, populations enslaved, dissent brutally suppressed. And he realizes that he's become the architect of the very suffering he thought he was preventing. His relationship with Palpatine also deteriorates. The Emperor, having secured Luke's loyalty, becomes less careful about hiding his true nature. Luke witnesses Palpatine's casual cruelty, his sadistic enjoyment of others' pain, his complete lack of empathy or compassion. He hears Palpatine speak dismissively of Luke's father, calling Vader a failure and a broken tool. He realizes that Palpatine views him the same way, as a useful weapon rather than an apprentice or heir. The turning point comes during a mission to the Outer Rim. Luke is sent to crush a rebel cell that's been disrupting Imperial operations. When he arrives, he discovers that the cell is composed primarily of refugees from Alderaan, people who were off-world when the Death Star destroyed their home. These are Leia's people, survivors who are fighting because they literally have nothing left to lose. The Empire took everything from them. Luke is ordered to execute them all, to make an example that will discourage other resistance. And as he stands before these people, many of them elderly, some of them children, all of them looking at him with a mixture of fear and hatred, something finally breaks inside him. He sees Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen in their faces. He sees the moisture farmers he grew up with. He sees himself as he was before all of this started, just someone trying to live their life in an uncaring galaxy. He lowers his lightsaber. He can't do it. He tells the refugees to run, to hide, to get away, and then he does something he hasn't done in years. He defies Palpatine's orders. He reports that the rebel cell was destroyed, but in reality, he helped them escape. It's a small act of mercy, insignificant in the grand scheme of galactic politics, but for Luke, it's monumental. It's the first time since Cloud City that he's chosen compassion over obedience, light over darkness. But Palpatine knows. Of course he knows. The Emperor has been monitoring Luke through the Force, watching for any sign of wavering loyalty. He knows Luke allowed the refugees to escape, and he knows this means Luke is becoming unreliable. Palpatine summons Luke back to Coruscant, and Luke knows he's walking into a trap. But he goes anyway because Leia is still there, still a hostage, and he won't abandon her. The confrontation in the throne room is inevitable. Palpatine reveals that he knows what Luke did, and he gives Luke a choice. He can prove his loyalty once and for all by personally hunting down and killing the refugees he let escape, or he can face the consequences of his betrayal. Those consequences, Palpatine makes clear, include Leia's death. The Emperor is done with games. He wants absolute obedience or he'll destroy everything Luke cares about. Luke refuses. After years of servitude, after countless atrocities committed in the Empire's name, he finally, decisively, chooses the light. He ignites his lightsaber, and for the first time since he took Vader's hand on Cloud City, he attacks Palpatine not as a loyal apprentice, but as an enemy. The battle that erupts is cataclysmic. Luke is incredibly powerful, trained by both Vader and Palpatine, a master of dark side techniques. But Palpatine is the Dark Lord of the Sith, with decades more experience and a wellspring of malevolent power. As they fight, Leia acts. She's been preparing for this moment, gathering her strength, and when Luke makes his move against Palpatine, she strikes at the Imperial guards protecting the throne room. She's weak, still damaged from the Force lightning years ago, but she's determined. She fights her way toward Luke, intent on helping him, on facing Palpatine together as they should have from the beginning. The duel between Luke and Palpatine is brutal. The throne room is torn apart by their power. Force lightning and lightsaber strikes illuminate the darkness. Luke draws on everything he's learned, every dark side technique, every ounce of power he's accumulated over years of training. But he's also drawing on something else now: his love for Leia, his memories of his family, his hope for redemption. He's fighting not from anger or hatred, but from a desperate need to protect what little good remains in his life. Leia reaches them and joins the fight. Brother and sister, the twin children of Anakin Skywalker, stand together against the Emperor. It's the confrontation Palpatine has feared. The reason he tried to turn them against each other. United, the Skywalker twins are incredibly powerful. Their connection through the Force amplifies their abilities. They begin to overwhelm Palpatine, pushing him back, landing strikes that would fell lesser opponents. But Palpatine has one final trick. He unleashes the full extent of his power, channeling a storm of Force lightning that engulfs both twins. It's the same technique he used to torture Leia years ago, but magnified 1,000-fold. Luke and Leia are both caught in the maelstrom of dark side energy, their bodies racked with agony. Palpatine is killing them both, and he's savoring every moment of their suffering. In this desperate moment, Luke makes a choice that mirrors his father's final act in the original timeline. He throws himself between Palpatine and Leia, absorbing the full force of the Emperor's attack. The lightning tears through him, destroying his body, but it gives Leia the opening she needs. Drawing on reserves of strength she didn't know she had, Leia channels the Force and strikes at Palpatine. Her attack, fueled by years of pain, loss, and determination, catches the Emperor off guard. She doesn't kill him, but she wounds him badly enough that his concentration breaks and the Force lightning ceases. Luke collapses, his body smoking from the Emperor's attack. He's dying, and he knows it. But unlike his father, who died redeemed, Luke's death is more ambiguous. He turned back to the light at the end. Yes, but only after years of serving darkness. He killed Jedi. He destroyed rebel bases. He enforced Palpatine's tyranny across the galaxy. One final act of heroism doesn't erase all of that. As he lies dying, he looks at Leia and asks for forgiveness. She gives it without hesitation, cradling his head and telling him that he's her brother, that she loves him, that she understands. Luke dies in Leia's arms, his final words a whisper. He's sorry. Sorry for everything. Sorry for failing her, for failing the galaxy, for failing himself. Leia holds him as his body fades, becoming one with the Force. She's lost her brother, her twin, the other half of her soul. But she doesn't have time to grieve. Palpatine is wounded but not defeated, and he's already gathering power for another attack. The battle between Leia and Palpatine continues, but now it's different. Leia isn't fighting with dark-side anger or aggression. She's fighting with the calm certainty of a true Jedi, the path Luke might have walked if he'd made different choices. She's been studying the light side while imprisoned, learning from Luke's mistakes, understanding that power without compassion is just tyranny with a different name. Her defense is perfect, her counterattack's precise. She's not stronger than Palpatine, but she's fighting for something he can't understand: hope. The duel rages through the Imperial Palace. Stormtroopers and Imperial guards try to intervene, but the sheer power being thrown around makes it impossible for them to approach. Eventually, Leia and Palpatine's battle takes them to a precarious location, a maintenance shaft or a reactor core, someplace where the infrastructure of Coruscant itself is exposed. In a final, desperate move, Leia sacrifices her lightsaber, her weapon, to create a massive force push that sends Palpatine tumbling into the depths below. The Emperor falls, screaming his rage and hatred, and disappears into the darkness. Whether he survives or not is unclear, but for the moment, he's gone. Leia stands alone in the ruins of the throne room, surrounded by the bodies of Imperial guards and with her brother's corpse still lying where he fell. She's won, but at what cost? Luke is dead. The Emperor may return. The Empire still controls most of the galaxy. And she's exhausted, wounded, and alone. But she's also free for the first time in years. The hostage situation that kept her imprisoned is over. She can finally act. She takes Luke's body with her as she escapes the Imperial Palace. It's a dangerous, harrowing flight through Coruscant's undercity, avoiding Imperial forces that are mobilizing to find her. But Leia has help. The news of the Emperor's disappearance and Luke Skywalker's death spreads quickly through the underworld networks, and suddenly, sleeper cells of rebels that have been dormant for years activate. They help Leia escape, smuggling her off Coruscant and back to what remains of the Rebel Alliance. Her return to the rebellion is bittersweet. She's their returned princess, their lost leader come home, but she brings with her the body of their fallen hero. Luke Skywalker, the destroyer of the Death Star, the last hope for the Jedi, is dead. Some rebels see him as a traitor who got what he deserved. Others see him as a victim of the dark side who found redemption at the end. Leia won't let anyone speak ill of him. He was her brother, and despite everything he did, he saved her life in the end. She arranges for him to be cremated in the Jedi tradition, his ashes scattered in space, but the galaxy doesn't stop for grief. With Palpatine gone, or at least missing, and Luke dead, the Empire begins to fracture. Various Moffs, admirals, and Imperial officials start claiming authority, each insisting they're the rightful successor to the Empire. Some try to continue Palpatine's policies. Others attempt to reform the Empire into something less oppressive. A few even reach out to the rebellion, proposing peace or alliance. The monolithic Empire begins to splinter into warlord territories, each claiming legitimacy. This is both an opportunity and a crisis for the rebellion. On one hand, the Empire's disunity gives them breathing room and a chance to reclaim lost territory. On the other hand, a fractured empire is unpredictable. Some Imperial remnants might be open to peace, but others could be even more brutal than Palpatine, using whatever weapons they can to maintain power. The Death Star is still operational, now controlled by whoever commands the fleet at Endor. That weapon could be turned on any world, rebel or Imperial, by whoever manages to seize control of it. Leia throws herself into the work of rebuilding the rebellion and planning for the future. She's changed, hardened by years of captivity and by watching her brother's fall and redemption. She's no longer the idealistic princess who believed in the power of senatorial procedure and peaceful protest. She's a warrior now, a force-sensitive leader who understands that sometimes freedom has to be fought for with blood and sacrifice. She begins training more seriously in the Force, not as Luke trained under Vader, but as a true Jedi, learning from the holocrons and texts the rebellion has managed to preserve. Han Solo, who waited for her all these years, never giving up hope, is overjoyed to have her back. But he also sees the changes in her. She's colder now, more distant, haunted by what she experienced and what she witnessed. Their relationship, which might have blossomed into romance in another timeline, becomes more complicated here. Han loves her, but he's not sure he knows this version of Leia. She loves him too, but she's afraid to let anyone get too close, afraid of losing them the way she lost Luke. The rebellion under Leia's leadership becomes more aggressive. They launch campaigns to reclaim key systems, targeting the fractured Imperial remnants one by one. Some surrender peacefully, others fight to the last. The galaxy descends into a period of civil war more chaotic than anything during Palpatine's reign. It's not the clean narrative of rebellion versus empire anymore. It's dozens of factions fighting for control, for revenge, for ideology, or just for survival. One of the major threats that emerges is a faction of dark side users who claim to be Palpatine's true heirs. These aren't Sith in the traditional sense, but they're powerful Force users who studied under Palpatine or learned from Sith holocrons. They see Luke's fall and redemption as proof that the Skywalker bloodline is weak, and they position themselves as the true inheritors of Sith power. Leia has to face these Darksiders, and it's terrifying because every time she fights them, she's reminded of Luke, of what he became, of how thin the line is between light and dark. Years pass in this unstable state. The galaxy never fully unifies under either rebel or imperial control. Instead, it becomes a patchwork of different governments, some democratic, some authoritarian, some somewhere in between. The New Republic is eventually established, but it's weak, constantly threatened by imperial remnants, dark side cults, criminal syndicates, and internal divisions. Leia becomes one of its leaders, a senator and a general, but she's never able to create the peaceful, just galaxy she once dreamed of. She also never fully recovers from Luke's fall and death. She carries that weight with her for the rest of her life. She names her son Ben, after Obi-Wan Kenobi, hoping that he'll embody the kind of wisdom and virtue that Ben represented. But she's also terrified that her son will fall to the dark side like his uncle. She's overprotective, constantly watching for signs of darkness, and this fear ironically pushes Ben away from her. The cycle threatens to repeat itself. As Leia grows older, she becomes a legendary figure, the princess who survived captivity, who fought the Emperor, who witnessed her brother's fall and redemption, who rebuilt the rebellion and helped establish the New Republic. But she's also profoundly lonely. Han is there, loyal as ever, but even he can't fully reach the parts of her that were damaged by those years. She sometimes meditates and reaches out through the Force, trying to sense Luke's presence, hoping that he found peace in death even if he couldn't find it in life. There are moments when she thinks she feels him, a familiar warmth in the Force, a sense of presence that reminds her of better times. She wants to believe that Luke became one with the Force, that he's watching over her, that he's finally found the peace he could never find in life. But she can never be sure. The Force is mysterious, and the dead don't speak clearly. She's left with questions that will never be fully answered. In this timeline, the galaxy never experiences the clear victory of good over evil that the original timeline provided. There's no triumphant celebration on Endor with Ewoks dancing and the spirits of Jedi past appearing to smile upon the heroes. Instead, there's a messy, ambiguous outcome where the Empire falls, but nothing clean replaces it. Where the hero becomes a villain and finds redemption only in death. Where the cost of victory is so high that it barely feels like victory at all. But there's another branch of this dark timeline we need to explore, one that's even darker. What if Luke doesn't turn back to the light in the end? What if when he lets those Alderaanian refugees go, he doesn't have a moment of clarity? What if instead, he successfully hides his mercy from Palpatine and continues to serve the Empire, but now with a growing sense of doubt and self-loathing that he buries deep inside? In this version, Luke becomes increasingly disconnected from himself. He performs his duties as Palpatine's enforcer, but inside, he's dying slowly. The darkness consumes him more completely because he can't even acknowledge his own doubts. He becomes colder, more mechanical, almost like Vader in his prime. His humanity erodes year by year until there's almost nothing left of the farm boy from Tatooine. Leia, still a hostage, watches her brother's transformation with horror. She tries repeatedly to reach him, but Luke has shut himself off from her through the Force. He can't bear to feel her disappointment, her pity, her love. It reminds him too much of what he's lost. So he builds walls, cutting himself off not just from Leia, but from his own emotions. He becomes a perfect tool for Palpatine, exactly what the Emperor always wanted. Under this version of Luke's leadership, the rebellion is systematically destroyed. Without any moments of mercy, without any hesitation, Luke hunts down every last rebel cell. Han Solo is captured and executed. Chewbacca dies defending him. Mon Mothma is assassinated. Admiral Akbar's fleet is destroyed in a trap that Luke designs. One by one, the heroes of the rebellion fall, and with them, hope dies across the galaxy. The rebellion's final stand comes at their secret base, a last, desperate gathering of the few remaining rebel forces. They know they're going to lose, but they're determined to go down fighting. Luke leads the assault personally, and the battle is brutal. In the chaos, Leia escapes her guards and makes her way to the battlefield. She faces Luke one final time, not to fight him, but to try one last time to save him. They stand in the ruins of the rebel base, surrounded by the dead and dying, fires burning all around them. Leia, exhausted and wounded, tells Luke that she loves him, that she forgives him, that it's not too late to come back. She reminds him of their childhood, of the family they should have had, of the future they could still have if he would just let go of his hatred and anger. She tells him about their mother, Padme, who died believing there was still good in Anakin. She tells him that she believes the same about him. Luke stands silent, his yellow eyes burning, his lightsaber ignited. For a long moment, nothing happens. Leia thinks maybe, just maybe, she's reached him. But then Luke raises his lightsaber and strikes. He doesn't kill Leia quickly or mercifully. He's too far gone for that. Instead, he prolongs her suffering, making her death a message to any who would resist the Empire. This is what happens to traitors. This is what happens to those who defy the Emperor. Even family means nothing in the face of absolute power. Leia dies in agony, and with her death, the rebellion dies too. The galaxy enters a new dark age, one that will last for generations. Luke continues to serve Palpatine, but he's essentially dead inside. He's a ghost, a hollow shell that performs its function without thought or feeling. He's achieved ultimate power and lost everything that made life worth living. He's become the very thing Uncle Owen feared when he told Aunt Beru that Luke couldn't stay on Tatooine, that he had too much of his father in him. Decades pass in this darkest timeline. Luke eventually becomes so powerful that even Palpatine fears him. The Emperor tries to arrange Luke's death, but Luke discovers the plot and kills Palpatine, just as Vader wanted to do in the original plan. Luke becomes Emperor Skywalker, the immortal tyrant who rules through fear and overwhelming power. He's learned Sith techniques for extending his life, and he rules for centuries, becoming a legend and a nightmare. The undying God Emperor who crushed all hope and freedom in the galaxy. In this version, there is no redemption, no light at the end of the tunnel. Luke Skywalker becomes the greatest villain the galaxy has ever known. Worse than Palpatine because he has the power of the Skywalker bloodline. Worse than Vader because he never had that moment of redemption. Worse than any Sith Lord because he rules for so long that entire generations grow up knowing nothing but his tyranny. The galaxy forgets what freedom tasted like. It forgets the Jedi. It forgets hope. All it knows is Emperor Skywalker, the undying master of the dark side, the final corruption of the Chosen One's legacy. But let's return to the version where Luke dies redeemed, because that's ultimately more interesting and more tragic. In that timeline, Leia survives and continues to fight for decades. She eventually has children, and they grow up hearing stories about their Uncle Luke, the fallen Jedi who found redemption at the end. These stories become legends, cautionary tales about the dangers of the dark side, but also hopeful reminders that redemption is always possible, even for those who have fallen far. Leia establishes a new Jedi Academy, determined to prevent future generations from making Luke's mistakes. But she teaches a different kind of Jedi philosophy than what came before. She emphasizes emotional awareness rather than emotional suppression. She believes that the old Jedi Order failed because they tried to deny the reality of human emotions, and that denial made their students vulnerable to the dark side. Instead, she teaches her students to acknowledge their emotions, to understand them, to use them constructively rather than trying to pretend they don't exist. This new Jedi Order is different from what Luke might have created, different from what the old Republic Jedi were. It's more balanced, more realistic, and arguably more sustainable. Leia's students learn that love isn't something to be feared, but something to be cherished. That anger isn't inherently evil, but must be channeled properly. That fear is natural, but shouldn't control you. It's a philosophy born from watching her brothers fall and understanding what went wrong. But Leia never trains another student as powerful as Luke was. She's careful about that. She's seen what happens when someone with that much power falls to the dark side, and she's determined never to create another monster. This means the Jedi Order remains relatively weak, more focused on wisdom and guidance than on raw power. Some criticize this approach, saying the Jedi need to be strong to face dark side threats. Leia responds that the Jedi's strength should come from their principles, not their power, and that creating beings of immense forceability is too dangerous. As the years pass and Leia ages, she becomes a living connection to the past, one of the last people alive who remembers the original Empire, who knew Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine, who witnessed the fall of one Skywalker and the rise of another. Young Jedi students sit at her feet and listen to her stories, and she always tells them about Luke. Not just his fall, but who he was before. The kind, optimistic farm boy who dreamed of adventure. The brave pilot who destroyed the Death Star. The devoted friend who would risk everything for those he cared about. She tells them that Luke Skywalker was one of the most powerful Force users who ever lived. But that power didn't save him. She tells them about the moment on Cloud City when Luke took Vader's hand, the decision that changed everything. She explains how pain, betrayal, and anger can twist your perceptions, making evil seem like good and tyranny seem like order. And she tells them about Luke's redemption, how in his final moments, he chose to sacrifice himself to save her, how he died with her forgiveness. In his teenage years, Ben rebels against this pressure. He delves into the history of his grandfather and uncle, trying to understand them, trying to figure out if darkness is just inevitable for his family. He finds Sith holocrons that Leia kept locked away, and he studies them in secret. He's not trying to become a Sith. He's trying to understand what drove his family members to fall, trying to figure out if he's doomed to the same fate. Leia discovers what Ben is doing and is horrified. She sees Luke in him, sees the same curiosity about power, the same willingness to flirt with darkness in pursuit of understanding. They have a terrible argument where Leia, driven by fear, says things she doesn't mean. She tells Ben that she's afraid he'll end up like Luke, that the Skywalker bloodline might be cursed. that maybe some people are just meant for darkness. Ben, hurt and angry, runs away. This becomes a crisis point for the new generation. Ben Solo, the grandson of Anakin Skywalker and nephew of Luke Skywalker, is loose in the galaxy with knowledge of the dark side and a head full of anger and hurt. Leia blames herself, seeing her own mistakes reflected in how she handled Ben, just as the old Jedi Order's mistakes were reflected in how they handled Anakin. But unlike the old order, she doesn't give up on him. She searches for him relentlessly, determined to save him before he falls too far. The search takes years. Ben wanders the galaxy, encountering various Force traditions, learning from different teachers, trying to figure out who he is and what he believes. He's tempted by the dark side repeatedly, but he's also repelled by it. He's seen what it did to his uncle, and he doesn't want that fate. But he's also angry at the Jedi, at his mother, at the expectations placed on him. He exists in a gray area, neither fully light nor fully dark. Eventually, Leia finds him. Their reunion is emotionally charged. Leia apologizes for what she said, for letting her fear control her, for repeating the mistakes of the past. She tells Ben that he's not Luke, that he's not Anakin, that he's his own person, and he gets to choose his own path. She offers him a place in the new Jedi Order, but she makes it clear that it's his choice. She won't force him, won't pressure him, won't make him feel like he has to be anyone other than who he is. Ben, moved by his mother's words and her willingness to admit her mistakes, returns with her. But he's changed by his years of wandering. He has a broader perspective on the Force than traditional Jedi teachings allow. He believes in balance, in acknowledging both light and dark, in not fearing emotions but also not being controlled by them. He becomes a teacher in Leia's academy, bringing a new perspective that challenges and enriches the existing teachings. This becomes the final evolution of the Jedi in this timeline. They're not the stoic, emotion-denying Jedi of the Old Republic. They're not the dark side corrupted Sith. They're something new, a synthesis that acknowledges the full spectrum of human experience and tries to navigate it with wisdom rather than rigid rules. It's imperfect, constantly evolving, but it's healthier than what came before. Leia sees this evolution and allows herself to feel a measure of peace. Luke's fall, as terrible as it was, taught lessons that are shaping a better future. His death wasn't meaningless. His redemption, as incomplete as it was, demonstrated important truths about the Force and about human nature. The galaxy is still imperfect, still struggling with the aftermath of the Empire, but it's moving in a better direction. As Leia nears the end of her life, she reflects on everything that happened. She thinks about Luke often, wondering what he would have been like if he'd never fallen, what kind of Jedi he might have become, what kind of life they might have had together. She mourns the loss of all those possibilities, the future that never was. But she also appreciates what actually happened, the lessons learned, the growth that came from tragedy. In her final days, surrounded by her family and her students, Leia feels a presence in the Force. It's familiar, warm, and for just a moment, she's certain it's Luke. He's there with her, not as the dark enforcer he became, not as the broken man who died seeking redemption, but as the brother she remembers from before everything went wrong, the optimistic farm boy with a good heart. She reaches out to him through the Force and she feels him reach back. There are no words, just a sense of connection, of forgiveness given and received, of love that transcends death and darkness. Leia dies peacefully, becoming one with the Force. Her students feel her passing like the setting of a gentle sun, warm and right. They mourn her, but they also celebrate her life and her teachings. The Jedi Order she built continues, carrying forward the lessons learned from her brother's fall and her own long struggle. The galaxy continues to evolve, to grow, to struggle with the eternal questions of right and wrong, light and dark, and somewhere in the Force, two presences exist side by side, brother and sister, reunited at last. Luke Skywalker, who fell so far and paid such a terrible price for his redemption, and Leia Organa, who never gave up on him even when all hope seemed lost. Their story becomes legend, a tale told across generations, a reminder that the path to darkness is easy, but the path to redemption, no matter how difficult, is always there for those brave enough to take it. This is what happens when Luke Skywalker turns to the dark side. The galaxy suffers. Countless people die. The rebellion nearly falls. One of the greatest heroes becomes one of the greatest villains. But even in the darkest timeline, there's still the possibility of redemption. Still the chance to choose light over darkness. Still the opportunity to make things right, even when all seems lost. That's the enduring lesson of Star Wars, the truth that transcends any single timeline or any individual choice. Luke's fall would have been catastrophic, but it wouldn't have been final. As long as people like Leia exist, people who refuse to give up on those they love, who believe in redemption even when it seems impossible, who are willing to fight for a better future despite all the reasons to despair, there's always hope. That hope might look different than we expected. It might come at a terrible cost. The victory might be incomplete, the healing partial, the wounds permanent. But it's still hope, still worth fighting for, still worth believing in, and that, ultimately, is what makes this dark timeline so powerful. It shows us how close Luke came to falling, how easily everything could have gone wrong, and how much depended on his choice in those critical moments. It makes us appreciate the choices he made in the original timeline, the strength it took to resist temptation, the courage it took to throw away his lightsaber and declare himself a Jedi even when facing certain death. Luke Skywalker was a hero not because he was invincible or perfect, but because when faced with the ultimate test, he chose right over easy, light over darkness, and redemption over revenge. In our dark timeline, he makes the opposite choice, and we see the devastating consequences ripple out across the entire galaxy. It's a sobering reminder of how important our choices are, how much they matter, and how the fate of everything we care about can rest on a single decision made in a moment of pain and desperation. Luke Skywalker turned to the dark side, and the galaxy would never be the same. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with you, always.